Hi, and welcome to episode 39 of the Give Me a Crown Knitting, Spinning and Bits and Pieces podcast. Today is Sunday the 3rd of July 2016, and my name's Nina, also known as Give Me a Crown on Ravelry, Instagram, Pinterest, and it's also the name of my Etsy shop. I'm coming to you from the central west of New South Wales in Australia, and I hope that you've got something crafty in your hands and maybe a cup of tea or coffee. And I'll show you some of the things that I've been working on in the past week. We have 1 week to go in the local knit along in the Give Me a Crown Ravelry group, so don't forget to pop your entries into the finished objects thread or pop by and have a bit of a chatter, and there will be prizes drawn next week for both of those threads. So I have some finished objects. I wasn't entirely expecting to have several, but I do. So the first of my finished objects is something that I've been working on for a few weeks, and it's my handspun socks. So if you've been following me on Instagram, you'll know that I've finished these up. So this was the second sock, which went from a green through to purple and then through to a blue, and these are from my handspun that I made from some fondant fibre, superwash merino and nylon. I used the Sockmaticians Toe Ups Patterns heel for these, so this was the first time that I had done a gusseted heel on a toe up sock, and I haven't done toe up socks too often, so it's a little bit of practice for that. I've spoken a fair bit about these in recent episodes, so I won't go into too much detail, but one thing I noticed was that my gauge was a fair bit tighter on these socks than normal, and I think that the yarn itself was almost sport weight, so that's sort of something to do with it, because I was knitting on 2.25mm needles, which is the US 1, I believe, and I probably should have gone up a needle size, and they're a little bit bulletproof, but I think that's going to help them with their wear. I mentioned last week that I'd somehow missed a couple of stitches in the heel and ended up with too few when I finished that, but they fit fine after I added in a few extra stitches. As for the size of these, I was mainly eyeballing as I was knitting along on the second one to sort of see that it matched the first one. I did count up the rows after I'd done the eyeballing, and the number of rows was a little bit different, but I'm not worried about that. I think that with handspun, the row gauge can vary a little bit based on how that particular section of yarn was spun, so overall I think that they match. So these haven't been blocked yet, but I have a feeling they're just going to end up on my feet without actually blocking them. But maybe I should give them a soak. But the yarn had a soak after I spun it, so I'm tempted to just wear them and see how they go. So it will be the first time that I've used a handspun with nylon in it, so I'm interested to see how well they wear. I probably won't be putting these into my boots, which I do with all my other hand knit socks, but they're going to be fun to wear. I still have 45 grams of this yarn to go, so I think that I'll probably be doing a blanket square at some point, and also I might do up some minis, so some lucky people might be getting some of those. I have also been working on, I'll put that somewhere else so that it doesn't fall over. I mentioned a few weeks ago that I wanted to make a hot water bottle cozy, so I made this week. So it is winter here and it has been cold, and a hot water bottle I find very helpful in popping it into the bed under the sheets before I hop in there, and it makes it nice and warm. So I decided to make up my own pattern. I had looked at some on Pinterest and on Ravelry just to see how they were made, but I decided that it can't be too hard to make up a little cozy like this. I was using up some stash yarn, so this is a Moda Vera Garifano yarn, and some people who have seen the podcast before might recognise the colour because I've used it in my turtle vest, I think I ended up calling that one particular pullover sort of thing without sleeves and with a turtleneck. And I also used this as an accent colour on my garter stitch slippers recently. So this is a yarn that I was given quite a few years ago, and I'm just trying to use it up basically. I don't have the actual content with me, but I think it was 50% acrylic, 40% wool and 10% silk or something like that. So I was a little bit concerned that I wouldn't be able to get a good stitch definition on cables because of the silk content. It is a very drapey yarn, but turned out fine. So what I did was I had a look at my turtle vest and measured the gauge, and based on that I measured my hot water bottle and sort of figured out how many stitches to cast on. I then had a little bit of a think about what kind of cables I wanted to do, and I did up a chart. So this is my little Excel chart where I've put in the different cables, and I've used this a piece of washi tape and I just sort of move it up with each row so that I know what I'm doing. I sort of figured it out as far as it actually repeats, and then I was able to hop back down here. So I think I did about 1.5 of these, or 2 repeats of the pattern. So I have a double moss stitch along the side, a couple of cables, and then this sort of squiggly cable. I don't know what it's called. And I think it turned out alright. I was practicing cabling without a cable needle, so because I was using 6mm needles, which is a fairly large one. I don't know what the US size is, but it's a fairly large needle, so I tried to sort of basically pick up the stitches that were going into the cable from behind or in front, drop off the first lot and then pick them back up again. I will probably try to link to a tutorial somewhere in the show notes, but it worked fine. I didn't drop any stitches, didn't lose any, and it was nice and quick considering the number of cables that are going on in here. I worried a little bit about not having a seam at the base because I did Judy's Magic Cast On to start this project, but I don't think it's going to be a problem considering that most of the time it just lays flat like that. So it's a hot water bottle. And then with the ribbing looks a little bit strange up here because it was a little fault of mine that it has a long neck that can then be rolled over. So what I was trying to do was I tried to get the different cable patterns to go nicely into the rib. It's a bit hard to show. I didn't think about the fact that when you actually roll down the top of it, it kind of defeats the purpose. So it's now a bit wonky. But so there's 4 stitches here, 2 in there, 2 in there, 3 somewhere else. It's only the sort of thing that a knitter or someone would pick up, but I should have probably just done a 2x2 rib, and I think it would have turned out fine. I don't think I needed to worry about it, but I have a hot water bottle cover. I have also been working on a few projects. So this is I've made a little bucket out of my Craftfulness project bag that Sandra from the Craftfulness podcast and Etsy shop sent to me in a swap. And I've been working on some 2 at a time socks because this was something that I wanted to try out this year. It was part of my 2016 yarn goals. So I have gotten this far. And so these are cables as well. I've definitely been feeling the cable love at the moment. The colours are coming up a little bit different there. It is a mustard colour, but probably not as bright as what it shows up on screen, so it's more like that. These are being based on a stitch pattern that was sent to me by a Finnish knitter called Venla Van, or rather her Instagram name is Venla Van. I think her name is just Venla. I saw some socks that she was knitting on Instagram maybe a month or 2 ago, and I was oohing and ahhing about them, and she kindly sent me the chart for the cable, and she has since put it up on her blog. So while the blog post is in Finnish, if you can read a chart, then you can easily do this cable pattern. I think it's a beauty. So in the instructions, it doesn't sort of go too much into detail, but it does mention how many stitches she cast on. And so I sort of looked at the photos and looked at what she'd written to figure out what I could do. So on the back I have got a 2x2 rib on the back, and then on the front I modified the ribbing to sort of flow into the different cables so that it looks continuous. What else can I say about these? So these are my first 2 at a time socks. I think I tried to do it once before and gave up pretty quickly, and then I have done some 2 at a time sleeves once, I think. So it's not really my first 2 at a time project, but it is my first 2 at a time sock project. I cast onto my circular needle, even though some people sort of say that it can be easier to cast on one sock at a time. I decided to go for the 2 at a time just to see how it worked, and it was fiddly, but after a few rounds it sort of settles down and it's a bit easier to manage. I looked at Mina from the Knitting Expats tutorial on 2 at a time socks a while ago, and I remembered that she suggested popping the 2 balls of yarn into a project bag, keeping them there, and then it's easier to manage your yarn so that they don't get into a tangle, and that has been working really, really well. So I recommend checking out Mina's 2 at a time tutorial, 2 at a time sock tutorial. Because I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy this process, what I decided to do was, rather than break my yarn, I actually have them still joined. They're looking a little bit worse for wear at the moment, but this is a 150 gram ball of yarn. So I put the ball of yarn on my scales, wound and wound and wound until I got halfway. So I wound up this ball, which was 75 grams, and then this is the leftover of the yarn ball. So they're still attached in case I change my mind, and it also means that once I finish my socks, I can just wind whatever's left between these two into one ball, and it won't have a join in it. I mean, putting a join into a project isn't that crucial, but it's not too much of a problem. But if you can avoid having to weave in a few ends, then it's always nice. So this yarn is a Finnish yarn that I regularly use. It's called Seitsemän veljestä, or Seven Brothers, by Novita, and it's a thicker yarn. It recommends 3.5 mil needles for socks, but I use 3 mil when I knit them. I prefer the fabric that I get from them. this yarn is sort of available in Finland widely, and I think in Sweden as well, and possibly other parts of Europe, but it's just I have a big stash of this yarn that I've brought back with me on trips, so I'm just trying to get some of it used. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be knitting these for me or for someone else. The cable pattern does make it fairly bulletproof. It sort of tightens up the stitches a lot. So this has more stitches on it than I would normally put for this kind of sock, but I think it's fitting fine. I'm not sure at the moment whether or not to continue the pattern all the way down the foot. Venla's does do that, but it is a very fiddly cable pattern. It's fun, but it looks good, but it is fiddly. I'm using a cable needle for these, which I have somewhere in here. So I'm using one of these cable needles, and I'm doing that because of the number of cables going in different directions. I'm just finding it easier on a tight gauge to be using the cable needle, unlike with the hot water bottle cover. One thing I was wondering about when I was knitting these 2 at a time was whether knitting hand spun socks would make sense 2 at a time, because with hand spun, if the row gauge does change with the thickness of the yarn, because maybe you're not such a good spinner like me and end up with various sort of thicknesses of yarn, I was wondering if that would be a bit of a problem doing 2 at a time, because you might end up with one longer sock than the other. I mean, I guess overall it might only be half a centimetre difference or a quarter of an inch or something like that, so it might not be too much of an issue, but it was just something that I was pondering when I was knitting these, having thought about the fact that I had different row counts on my hand spun socks. So I think that's that project. I've also started a slightly different kind of project. So I decided to crochet a doily. I just dropped my chart. When I was younger, I used to do a lot of these crochet monthly doilies. My mum bought these. I'm not too sure which country she's bought this one from. It has a price label. Actually, the year should tell me. It doesn't have a year on it. But we lived in Papua New Guinea when I was in my pre-teens, and there wasn't a great deal to do in Papua New Guinea. So my mum would do a lot of these crocheted doilies and tablecloths and curtains and all sorts of things. So I would pick out random crochet patterns to do myself, and I have been given quite a few of these magazines over the years. Mum just sort of bumps into them now and then and gives them to me, and I've had this particular one sitting around for a little while because I really like that doily. And my grandmother's, she loves to crochet, or she did, but she doesn't have the dexterity in her hands anymore to do it. So this particular one is one that I've been thinking about doing, and the other day I just decided to start it. So it's a charted pattern, and I am this far into it. I'll just take my needle out, my crochet hook out. So it's looking like that. At the moment it's a little bit wobbly because I'm just working on it, and it will be smoother once it actually gets finished and blocked. I've got the lighting's not working for me, but little bobbly bits in here. I don't know if I've done those kind of things in crochet before, but they're not too hard. So a doily. I'm using a 1.25mm upside down 1.25mm hook, so I'm not too sure what that is in US, but it's a small one, and I have this much cotton. So I'm not that sort of knowledgeable on cotton and hooks and all that kind of stuff, so I just kind of go by feel. So the pattern itself is suggesting a 1mm hook and number 40 crochet cotton. No idea what that is, no idea what this one is, but the stitches seem to be sort of working fine with this. I have tried before with other patterns to sort of substitute and ended up with things that curl up or curl down, but this one is laying flat enough that I'm happy that it will turn out okay. I've got no idea what size it's going to be. I'm guessing sort of around here somewhere, so maybe 40cm diameter perhaps, and I'll just keep plodding away on that now and then, and just something extra. I think my brain just needed something a little bit different to work on for a little bit, and just sort of realizing halfway through the year and maybe needing to get a few other things underway so that they're ready for the end of the year. I have not made any progress on my newborn vertebrae, so I think that probably means that I'm not going to be finishing that one. I'm not sure why. I think I probably just need to cast on something a little bit chunkier, something warmer for my cousin's soon-to-be baby, but I probably need to get onto that pretty soon. So I think she's at 28 weeks now. So I guess I still have a little bit of time. I just have to worry about delayed postage and stuff to Finland, but we'll see how we go. I have also done one square on my sock yarn blanket, but I will wait and show that once I've got a few more squares done. I've also got some acquisitions this week. So I placed an order with Kathy's Fibres after somebody in the Give Me a Crown Ravelry group mentioned Kathy's Fibres, so I placed an order and I got this beauty. So this is, that's Kathy's Fibres, kathysfibres.com. So she's in Adelaide. Oh wait, is Adelaide South Australia? Yes, she is, because the person who recommended was picking it up as a local supplier. This is the colourway Heath. Whoops, my braid just fell. 100 grams of fine merino, 20.7 micron. So that's what happens. So I picked this up because I like browns, and I thought that this might make for some good, something sort of manly-ish. So, but then it's also kind of me-ish. I'm not too sure how to spin this one yet. I don't know whether I might just let this one sort of jumble up the blues and the browns together, and I think it will come up kind of pretty. I also got this one. So this is one that people on Instagram liked a lot, and this was the first one that popped into my cart. So this is called Autumn, 100 grams, 20.7 micron fine merino. So this has got oranges and greens and a bit of purple and some sort of slightly browny colours. So this one I think I will need to figure out the colour management for. Not too sure how. Whether I go for stripes and then do a Navajo ply or something, but that is something to think about. I also got a couple of natural natural fibres, so they are still in their packaging, so I will mute the sound on this while I show them. So they were brown Corriedale tops and white fin tops, and so I just wanted to get some natural fibres and to see how they spin, different types of breeds to play around with, and I figure that they can be fun to combine with other fibres. But the white fin tops sort of fascinated me because I've heard the fin sheep mentioned on other podcasts, and I wondered whether or not it had something to do with Finland. And so when I saw that Kathy's Fibres had the fin tops in the shop, I googled up fin sheep, and it seems to be some kind of Finnish sheep brand, or breed rather, that has been sort of distributed around the world. So I'm not entirely sure where these particular fin sheep are from, but possibly grown in Australia, but they have some kind of Finnish heritage. So for me, being a Finn, thought that was kind of cool. So she had a few different types, and I just picked one, and I'll see how I go with those. So I'm not too sure which fibres I'll start with, but there are people who are doing the Tour de Fleece and who are also part of the Give Me a Crown Ravelry group. So I've started up a spinning chatter thread, and even if you're not taking part in Tour de Fleece, then feel free to pop in there and chat about spinning and what have you. I have a question in there at the moment. If anyone knows whether or not it's a good thing to get one of the sliding hooks on a flyer versus just the sort of the standard hooks, I'd love any thoughts on that. I want to get myself a jumbo flyer for my spinning wheel, and I don't know whether the sliding hook is a good investment. Is it likely to break? It doesn't seem like the sort of the traditional hooks have any particular problems, so they seem to be about the same price. So I just don't know whether or not I don't know which one to go with. So if you have any experience with sliding hooks, I'd be particularly interested in that. And that's it pretty much. I have some other acquisitions turning up possibly next week, so I look forward to sharing those. And then there might be some acquisitions the following week, because I found out that I'm the winner of a prize from the Yonder Woman Opposites knit along, so that was very exciting to watch yesterday and find out that I'd won a prize. It's the first time I've won a knit along prize, so it's great. It was for the block socks that I showed off a few weeks ago, which had the cables on opposite sides of the foot, and the cables were going in opposite directions, so that's very exciting. So I will go on to a bit of chatter. If you're not interested in that, then thank you for watching, and otherwise I thought that I would show that all my chat about the weather it's not for nothing, because this was this week's newspaper. Rain, hail, sleet and snow. It's been the wettest June on record. So yeah, I had something to complain about with all my chatter. That's a little bit of snow in Blaney, which I still haven't had any snow here. So there was some again forecast, and it didn't turn up. There was some in the future forecast, and now that's been changed to rain. So I think if it does snow, I might have to take the car out and go and try to chase down some snow. But I'm just really worried about driving on icy roads or anything like that. So as long as the snow happens in the afternoon, when the roads have had a chance to sort of chill out a little bit, or sort of warm up rather, I might go and give that a go. And I thought that I would just share something fun. So the local newspaper, it has ads for cute little sheepy things. So this one is for sheep nuts and cattle nuts, which is a type of food for sheep. So, cute little sheep, and there's wool reports and all sorts of things about what's happening in agriculture in the region. So, it makes for fun reading. What else? We had an election yesterday, and they haven't quite figured out who won yet. I popped by the local school where they had the voting, and I was hoping that there might be some lamingtons or cakes or something for sale, but they just had a sausage sizzle. So it is a small village, so it's kind of understandable that they don't have sort of a big do, whereas when I was in Sydney in primary school, there was a huge fete. There'd be games for kids and all sorts of stalls and various things, but I can't vote being a Finnish citizen, so yeah, I just sort of wandered in there, said hello to a couple of people and left, and went for a wander around the neighbourhood. So yeah, so election stuff happens. Chances are there won't be a new Prime Minister, but it's likely to be 3 years of minor chaos with possibly a hung parliament, so it'll be interesting. I always just have to hope that everyone gets the selection right, and yeah, these sort of hung parliament things aren't that great for everyone, but oh well, you get what other people choose. So what else? After my little lighting mishap last week, I contacted the seller and I am waiting on a replacement light globe. So thankfully it was only the globe that popped rather than the entire sort of light fixture, but I'm hoping that they only send a globe replacement. But so I should have better lighting again next week. Not too much else has been going on. The weather has been a little bit better, which is nice. Not so much rain, which I very much appreciate. But I have been looking at what other projects I could get going on the needles. I'm thinking about a shawl, possibly the Minamara shawl from Meg Gadsby. It's been in my library for a little while now, and I had some yarn that I was going to use for a top, and the yarn's from Circus Tonic Handmade, but I just feel like I need a shawl, so I think I'm going to use up one of those skeins and start a shawl this week. And yeah, I got my books done for the business, so that was good. Haven't actually done my taxes yet because I'm waiting on various bits and pieces of paper, but at least my books are in order, and that's helpful. But the rest is pretty much just boring. So I did take a bit of video this week of a local goat. It's normally in its yard, but this week it seems to have been randomly plonked in various places. I guess it's just chewing up the grass or something, but yeah, so I took a little bit of video of the goat. One of the neighbours' sheep seems to have had lots of lambs, so I took a bit of footage of, I think, just one of the sheep, because I think the lambs were on the other paddock, and then the day when I went past when all the sheep were there, or all the lambs were there, I forgot to take footage because I was too busy staring at the lambs. But I'll no doubt get some more sheepy footage soon, and I think there might be a galah video as well, so I will end on those little animal bits and pieces from out here. But I hope that you're well. I hope that you're having lots and lots of crafty time and enjoying sunshine and all that kind of stuff, and I'll see you soon.